The agricultural revolution, humanity's first great turning point. When we look back across the vast sweep of human history, there are only a handful of moments where the story of our species takes a sharp and irreversible turn. One of those turns happened quietly, long before the rise of kings or the clash of armies, before writing carved words into clay tablets or pyramids rose against desert skies. It began with something as small as a seed. The agricultural revolution, or Neolithic revolution as historians often call it, transformed humanity from scattered bands of hunter-gatherers into settled communities and eventually into builders of civilization. It was not a single moment, but a slow and uneven process, beginning around 12,000 years ago, unfolding independently in different parts of the world, and setting humanity on a path from which there was no turning back. To appreciate the magnitude of this change, we have to understand the world before farming. For the overwhelming majority of our existence, human beings lived as foragers. Small groups wandered constantly, following the shifting availability of food. They hunted deer, gazelle, bison, or smaller animals, and they gathered roots, berries, and nuts. The pace of life was set by the seasons and the migration of herds. People owned little because everything they had to be carried. Mobility meant equality. Leadership was fluid, based on skill or experience, and no one could accumulate more wealth than anyone else because there was nowhere to store it. Archaeological evidence suggests that foragers often enjoyed varied diets and may even have had more leisure time than many early farmers. In this world, freedom was bought with uncertainty. A bad season could mean hunger. A storm could drive animals elsewhere. Yet foragers knew the land intimately and lived in tune with its rhythms. Then came the end of the Ice Age, and with it a new set of possibilities. As glaciers receded, climate stabilized, plants spread into new areas, and humans, already skilled observers of the natural world, noticed patterns. Somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, a band of people returned to a campsite and saw barley sprouting in places where seeds had been spilled months before. The connection was made. Seeds left in the ground could grow into food that waited for them. It was a small, almost accidental discovery, yet it carried within it the power to reshape the future. Similar moments occurred in other regions. Rice in the river valleys of China, maize in Mesoamerica, potatoes in the Andes, yams and sorghum in Africa. These were independent revolutions, each unlocking the same insight. Humans could cultivate the earth instead of merely harvesting what it offered. The decision to plant meant the decision to stay. Fields needed tending through seasons, and harvests had to be guarded. To remain in one place meant building permanent homes, and from homes grew villages. At Jericho, one of the earliest settlements, mud brick houses clustered near a spring. Its people even built a massive stone tower and walls, signs that they already had to defend what they produced. In Anatolia, Katahoyo became a sprawling town of thousands, homes pressed together without streets, and people moved across the rooftops like an elevated maze. Inside, the walls were painted with bulls, hunters, and fertility figures, while beneath the floors lay the bones of ancestors. These villages marked a profound shift. Children born in them might never know the life of a wanderer. Their world was rooted in soil, bound by seasons, shaped by harvests. The crucial difference between farming and foraging was the creation of surplus. Hunters and gatherers rarely carried more than what they could consume in days. Farmers could store their harvest in jars, pits, and granaries. Surplus was a double-edged sword. It offered security against famine and supported growing populations, but it also created new problems. Who controlled the stored food? Who decided how it was distributed? Power began to accumulate in the hands of those who managed surplus. Leaders emerged, not because they were the best hunters, but because they controlled grain stores or claimed divine authority over the harvest. Inequality followed. Foragers had lived in relative balance. Farmers quickly found themselves divided into classes of those who owned land and those who worked it. Surplus also allowed specialization. One's food could feed more than just the farmer's family. Others could take on different roles: potters, weavers, builders, priests, and eventually scribes. Innovation accelerated, but so did hierarchy. Women, who in foraging societies had contributed significantly to food gathering, often saw their roles narrowed as heavy agricultural labor and inheritance systems favored men. Archaeological evidence shows the toll farming took on bodies. Spines bent from grinding grain, teeth riddled with cavities from starch-heavy diets, stature shorter than their ancestors. Crowded living with domesticated animals brought new diseases. Farming was grueling, repetitive, and often unhealthy, but once societies committed to it, they could not turn back. By 4000 BCE, the quiet revolution of seeds and soil had given rise to cities. In Mesopotamia, Uruk grew to tens of thousands of inhabitants. At its center rose ziggurats, monumental temples that dominated the skyline. Within their cool chambers, priests kept records on clay tablets. The world's first writing, cuneiform, was born not from poetry or philosophy, but from the need to track grain and livestock. Civilization began with receipts. Farmers lined up at temple granaries, delivering their share, while priests marked numbers in clay and offered blessings in return. Religion and government intertwined, each claiming authority over the harvest, each reinforcing the other's power. This pattern repeated globally. Along the Nile, Egypt's stability rested on the predictable flood, its black silt feeding wheat fields that sustained dynasties for thousands of years. Pharaohs, seen as gods, stood atop a system that coordinated labor on a massive scale, allowing pyramids to rise. In China, the collective labor of rice paddies demanded strong coordination and produced centralized states built on order and hierarchy. In Mesoamerica, maize became both staple and symbol, with myths teaching that humans themselves were made from corn. In the Andes, potatoes and quinoa grew in terraces cut into mountain slopes, while llamas carried loads along winding paths that knit highland cultures together. Though separated by oceans, the logic was the same. Agriculture produced surplus, surplus fueled population, population demanded organization, and organization crystallized into civilization. But the agricultural revolution also cast long shadows. Surplus made wealth worth stealing, so warfare escalated. Walls unclosed villages, armies marched across plains, and organized conquest replaced sporadic skirmishes. With farming came not only food but also property, taxes, and slavery. The environment strained under the new demands. Forests fell to make way for fields. Irrigation turned fertile land into salt-poisoned soil. The land was reshaped, often degraded, by human ambition. Historians debate whether this revolution was triumph or tragedy. Some, like Jared Diamond, call it the worst mistake in human history, pointing to evidence that early farmers worked harder, ate less nutritious diets, and suffered more disease. For individuals, life may indeed have been harsher than before. But for humanity as a species, agriculture made possible everything that followed. Writing, science, art, monumental architecture, complex religions, empires, and the modern world itself all rest on the foundation laid by farming. It may not have been a conscious choice, more an accumulation of small decisions and adaptations, but once made, it was irreversible. The legacy is all around us. Every loaf of bread, every bowl of rice, every tortilla carries the memory of those first domesticated plants. Every city skyline is built on the same principle as Uruk's ziggurat, the ability to feed thousands from the labor of the fields. The agricultural revolution was humanity's first great gamble. We exchanged freedom for stability, mobility for permanence, equality for hierarchy. We wagered that soil and seed could sustain us better than the hunt and the chase. It was a gamble that came with costs, but it created the world we now inhabit.